Mr. Graf.
Will the sponsor yield, please?
Ms. Nolan, will you yield? Sponsor yields.
Yes. Thank you, Kathy. First off, let me start by saying I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction, and we're actually looking at what's been going on in our schools over the last 3 years. And though I will support this legislation because it's a step in the right direction, I do have a couple questions pertaining to the bills and specific language in the bills. So with that, now we call for a significant amount of the test questions to be released. We call for a significant amount of the test questions to be released. Do we give a percentage there of how many questions should be released, or do we give them any guidance on how many questions should be released?
I don't think we gave a specific percent, but right now they were doing, I think, less than 50%, and we thought that was unreasonably small. And so we, by this language, encouraged the department to make more material available to teachers. I think I said during the budget debate in the spring, earlier part of the spring, how frustrated I, as a parent of a public school student, have been when I can't see a test, I can't see how my son did. So we want to make it more available to parents.
Okay. So we don't have a percent, like 60%, 70%, anything like that,
No.
right?
No.
But are we saying over 50% because that's what they were doing?
I don't think we spoke to it as a percent at all, but I think they're getting the message. There's a little nudge, you know, a little extra nudge in the language.
Right. Now, with with all the problems with Pearson, okay, we're given I think it's $8.4 million for more tests, and Pearson's going to be part of that, right? Some of that money's going to go to them?
No. Wait, I want to just answer the gentleman's question as quickly as I can. We here don't ever direct money like that. That's not something we do in the legislature. The State Education Department has a bidding and a procurement process. We don't recommend vendors here. That's a challenging area. I'm sure the gentleman knows that. We would not recommend that. What we're doing here, and the department has said it needs more funding to eliminate field tests, and so we are complying with that request. I want to stress again, we have no brief for any vendor. If anything, I think the gentleman knows how critical many of us have been of that particular vendor since the Pineapple Gate question of a few years ago. So we're certainly not trying to empower any particular testing company, of which I might add there are many that provide those services, so the State Ed Department can do a procurement.
Right. To your knowledge, though, the State Education Department is still purchasing materials from Pearson, correct?
Sorry, I shut my...
It wasn't me to cut you off, Kathy.
This is for the State Education Department to develop its own internal testing, not to procure it out.
Okay. Now, another part of the bill, if you go to page 3, I think it is, all right, we're creating, now we bring stakeholders into the process to create a rubric. I think a rubric. Is that correct? Or the commissioner?
Maybe the gentleman could restate the question. I'm not quite.
All right.
Are you referencing a particular part of the bill?
All right. No, throughout the bill, we bring in stakeholders for different parts of the bill. Stakeholders in education.
Oh,
correct?
a review committee. I see it. Yes.
Now, do we bring the stakeholders in to develop this rubric for the evaluations of the teachers?
No, Mr. Speaker. The language says that the commissioner is authorized and directed to establish a content review committee for the purposes of reviewing standardized tests and selected passages. And I want to thank, if I can, Assemblywoman Fahey. I know we don't want to single people out, but I know how hard she and other members have been working to have some kind of a content review committee.
Right. Now, who reviews this rubric for appropriateness? Anyone?
Well, the commissioner would have the final say. Again, it's the legislature using its oversight ability to give some direction to the State Education Department, which I'm sure they appreciate. But we do, from time to time, give them some guidance as to what we, as duly elected representatives, want for our families and our children. And so we've recommended that they establish this committee because many of us are concerned that the tests are not age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that the gentleman asking a question, our colleague and friend, is very well aware and has a distinguished background in educating children with special needs, and I know that this reflects some of the concerns that he expressed during the budget, that children with special needs were being unduly put to stress to take a test that they are not developmentally able to do. And so that's what it reflects.
Okay, and now we have the Content Review Committee, and these are made up of the stakeholders. So we have classroom teachers, experienced educators. We give them some guidance there, right?
Yes.
Now, if they make recommendations, so they're going to be looking at the tests that would be giving out, and they're going to be looking at the curriculum, correct?
Well, I would say generally yes, but again, the legislature doesn't do curriculum. We've asked the review committee to give the commissioners some consideration and guidance. That's not the same as mandating a curriculum, but we ask for their guidance and their input.
All right, do they have to, so if they make recommendations, does that have to be adopted by the regents?
No, I think it's a voluntary thing that we've established here, but just by in so doing, we've required the department to sort of more formally than perhaps they might usually do, listen to other voices. And for example, on page 3, it says, which shall take into consideration certain students' characteristics as determined by the commissioner, including but not limited to students with disability, poverty status, English language learner status, and prior academic history. So it's a broad brief, it's a broad portfolio, but it does give some legislative intent and guidance and oversight to the department.
Okay. Now, on page 4, if you go there, the Oversight Committee, that's going to be made up of classroom teachers, experienced educators, content area that you were talking about, they're going to review the tests before they're given, correct?
Again, I don't believe that committee would be reviewing the test or any test in the same way that perhaps a working group of the department employees might do. It's an advisory group that will give the commissioners some sense of the importance of certain areas that we in the legislature felt were not perhaps given their proper emphasis.
Well, it says here that when we're talking about the commission is authorized, directed to establish content review committee for the purpose of reviewing all standardized test items and or selected passages used in English language arts and mathematics state assessments for grades 3 through 8 and ensure they are grade level appropriate in general, but they are presented at a readability level that is grade level appropriate. They are within the grade level expectations, and they appropriately measure the learning standards approved by the Board of Regents applicable to such subject and or grade level. The review of such items and passes shall be conducted prior to their use in such assessments.
Correct.
So wouldn't that mean that they have to review the test before it's given?
Well, I think the question, the language implies that or states that, but I'm always hesitant on the floor, Mr. Speaker, to give an absolute determination because there is some discretion and authority, as always, as is appropriate for the commissioner. But generally, I would agree with the colleague's statement and say yes.
Okay, so they will review it prior to giving the test?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing, Kathy, we talk a lot about grade appropriate.
Go ahead.
We talk about grade appropriateness. Are we looking at, well, I don't see any mention here of developmental appropriateness when it comes to testing. So, for instance, if a child is developmentally in first grade and chronologically in 5th grade, presently they're testing them on a 5th grade level. Have we dealt with that in this?
Our answer to that question, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, would be that in the language that says the commissioner shall take into consideration certain student characteristics, including but not limited to. So obviously, not limited to means a broad definition of things like students with developmental delays. I do want to remind our colleagues that it does, however, say the words students with disabilities. So that's a broad definition and would clearly, in my mind, would cover children with developmental delays.
Okay. And now the Senate version of this bill also, and the Senate has complained for years, that they have no say in the choosing of the regents. And in the Senate's version of the bill, if I'm not mistaken, they change how the regents are selected. And I understand that there's one party in the House that has the ability to choose the regents. Is there any chance that the Assembly will negotiate with the Senate in choosing how the regents are chosen from going forward?
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, I'm not an attorney like so many of you, but I am a student of history of the place. And I did say it a little bit in jest, but I would love myself as a 30-year member of the legislature to be able to advise and consent when the governor appoints the Commissioner of Labor or the Commissioner of the Environmental Conservation Agency or the DMV. But I don't get that because I'm not a senator. So, you know, I kind of joked if they want to give up that or they want to have us vote on the DMV commissioner, I'd be happy, you know, to perhaps look at it. But since that's not happening, I don't think. And remember, our Senate colleagues do have a vote. We are in joint session in how we pick the regents. Sometimes, you know, that's the way the numbers go, you know, and that's okay because the people that founded our great state were probably wiser than all of us, and so they believed in separation of powers. So the governor gets to appoint certain things, the Senate gets to advise and consent on many, many, many appointments, of which I wish I had that power, but I never ran for the Senate. And we in the Assembly, because we're the closest to the people, have the largest voice on education policy. And I think our founding fathers and mothers were probably correct in that. But, you know, we can always keep talking. I'd love to have something to say about the Labor Commissioner, but, you know, they haven't let me yet.
Well, Kathy, if you're willing to write a bill, I'd be happy to co-sponsor that to give us more, you know, authority over the commission.
It may go to a very special committee, but we'll see.
Okay.